from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kayleigh Lines.
President Trump wraps his trip to the UK. Welcome to the Thursday edition of Balance of Power as the President and Prime Minister Keir Starmer talk business on day 2 of the trip and meet the press in a bilateral news conference. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kriti Gupta, who's in for Kayleigh, live in Washington. Kriti, pretty interesting, as we'll get an update here from Annmarie Hordern, who's traveling with the president here. Some carefully selected questions at that news conference today.
Selected and dodged, I would say. It would feel like the first time Donald Trump said, look, I disagree with one of my closest allies, and that's okay.
On a matter of Palestine, that's true. They talked about a lot of things in that news conference. Jeffrey Epstein did come up, but at the very end, President Trump did not weigh in. He just, by the way, got on the jet. They're heading home now on Air Force One and did not take questions from reporters who were lined up on the tarmac. But Annmarie is still at Windsor Castle. We'll have an update for us straight ahead. Also, a great conversation that we're looking forward to with Bloomberg Politics contributor and former Congressman Patrick McHenry, the former Republican congressman who once held the gavel as Speaker pro temp. Actually received a huge award this week for being the only person to ever do that. He was given an award by the Speaker of the House and will be with us in the chair here as we count down to a possible shutdown. He'll give us the real scoop on what's going on.
A lot to talk about: the shutdown, the politics, and then, of course, what he thinks about all these corporations and just how much they should be talking to Donald Trump.
That's true. It seems like there's a few $1 billion moving in either direction when that happens. Of course, in this case, it's Nvidia investing in, of all companies, Intel. And it's a big mover today. Let's get to Charlie Pellet first. He's looking at the markets for us with that story in mind, live from world headquarters in New York. Charlie, what do you have?
Right now, we've got stocks higher across the board. Cannot ignore the Intel story, though. The stock right now up 27%. I'll have more detail in a moment. Right now, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing close to session highs here. Day after the Fed decision, S&P right now advancing by 49 points, up by about 0.7%. We've got the Dow up 247, higher by 0.5, and NASDAQ is up 269, up 1.2%. Tech and small caps, the outperformers. The NASDAQ 100 index up 1.3%. The Russell 2000 index of small cap shares up by 2.4%. The 10-year at 4.09%, with the 2-year 3.55%. Gold is down 0.4%, 36.46 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.8%, 63.53 for a barrel of West Texas Intermediate crude. Bitcoin now up 1.7%, 117,654 on Bitcoin. As we have been reporting and as we've been covering on Balance of Power, Nvidia has agreed to invest $5 billion in Intel and says the two will co-develop chips for PCs and data centers, a surprise move to help prop up an ailing arch rival that sent Intel shares soaring. Again, Intel now up by 27.6%, Nvidia up by 3.6%. Recapping, 10-year yield at 4.10%, with the S&P up 0.7%. Balance of Power continues right now, and back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Mathieu and Kriti Gupta.
All right, Charlie, many thanks. Charlie will have more on the markets in about 20 minutes as we keep tabs on the Thursday trade. Welcome to Little Friday. You made it to the Thursday edition of Balance of Power here on Bloomberg TV and radio. It's great to have you. The president is on his way home along with the First Lady. They just climbed the stairs onto Air Force One, officially wrapping the trip to the UK. It was a busy day before that. Of course, they had a meeting with the press following a meeting with business leaders. And Bloomberg's Annmarie Hordern has been traveling with the president as he spoke earlier during that business meeting to our relationship with the United Kingdom. Let's listen.
The ties between our countries are priceless, and it's really an inheritance. It's a beautiful inheritance. Today, we're making those ties closer than ever before. We've done some things that financially are great for both countries, and we work together, and it keeps us together, and I think it's an unbreakable bond we have, regardless of what we're doing today. I think it's unbreakable.
An unbreakable bond. Annmarie Hordern, Bloomberg's chief political correspondent. It's still outside Windsor Castle, where all of the festivities have wrapped up. Annmarie, what was the news to come from the news conference? There were a lot of concerns about what topic might come up, some of them pretty sensitive, including Jeffrey Epstein.
Certainly some sensitive issues did come up. I would say 3 big announcements came out of today. But let's start with what you mentioned just there, Jeffrey Epstein. That came up at the very end of the news conference. It was notable. The president said that he didn't know the former British ambassador to the United States, Lord Peter Mandelson, who was ousted by the UK government after these revelations came to light in a Bloomberg News article about his close ties with Jeffrey Epstein. I find it difficult to really get on board with the president saying he didn't know this person, because I was in the Oval Office in May when they announced this deal. The prime minister was on speakerphone, but standing next to the president for how long we were in there, about 45 minutes to an hour or so at least, was Lord Peter Mandelson. So that was one issue that did come up at the very end. Another very sensitive topic, and probably one of the biggest points from the news conference, was, of course, the conflict in Gaza. And this came up a few times with both the U.S. and U.K. press for both Keir Starmer and President Donald Trump. Keir Starmer, the prime minister, is set to formally recognize a Palestinian state this weekend. The president said this is one area where we have few disagreements. Keir Starmer said they did speak about this and a number of other issues, frankly, one-on-one for about an hour alone. But I would note the president stopped there. He said this is one of our areas of few disagreements, but didn't try to change the prime minister's mind in front of the entire press. So that was one definitely notable moment. And I think a lot of questions remain, especially as we go into the UN General Assembly next week in New York, if this can cause any sort of friction between the special relationship of London and Washington. And then finally, of course, the tech deals. You know, it wasn't lost on me that Jensen Huang was with the president last night at the state banquet, at the business reception today, where the president called him out when he said AI is going to take over the world. We hope you're right, Mr. Jensen Huang. And we have Nvidia announcing a stake in Intel a month after the United States, U.S. government took a 10% stake in Intel. I think a lot of people are asking, is this state capitalism out of this U.S. government, or potentially state economic warcraft, because of the concerns they have about national security and China getting a leg up on the U.S. AI industry?
Lots, of course, happening in London on Donald Trump's agenda. Annmarie, he seemed to have plenty of time, though, to still respond to Jimmy Kimmel being put on indefinite leave from ABC. Just walk us through some of the commentary you've heard on your side of the Atlantic for that.
Well, the president brushed it off as just this was an individual who had low ratings. This is not something that is completely captivating the headlines here in the United Kingdom, because this is obviously something that is very domestically focused. The president was the one who said that this is the reason why, and said it comes after the fact that of his comments, Jimmy Kimmel's comments about Charlie Kirk. It also comes at a time, you know, when they're trying to do a deal. So this definitely has some political sensitivity around it, but the president pretty much just brushed it off as this was an issue of low ratings, not free speech. This is one issue that I'm sure he is going to be dealing with when he heads back to Washington. He's en route now back to the States.
Annmarie, thank you so much. Travel safe on your way home. Bloomberg's Annmarie Hordern live in the UK. I will say the president did weigh in on the firing of Jimmy Kimmel. It was 1:04 a.m. local time in the United Kingdom. Following the day of ceremony that we brought to you yesterday, the president on Truth Social, great news for America. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent, unquote. Also now predicting the firings of other late night hosts who he's not a fan of, knowing, of course, Stephen Colbert has a lot of time coming up on his hands. I want to talk about some of this and what's happening on Capitol Hill with Bloomberg political contributor Patrick McHenry. That would be the former Republican congressman, former chairman, and former Speaker pro tem, who had a big week in the House, receiving an important award as you are a singular person in history. I didn't realize you're the only person who held the gavel as Speaker pro tem.
Yes, and it's an unfortunate.
It's never happened.
Unfortunate
Series
of events.
I guess so.
And I'm the lone Speaker pro tem. I served for 23 days between Speaker 55 and Speaker 56, Speaker McCarthy and Speaker Johnson. And Speaker McCarthy is fond of calling me Speaker 55 and a half. So you got to have a sense of humor even in the midst of...
I want to note that Kevin McCarthy was there when you received this award from I want to get it's the Capital Historical Society, right?
That's right.
The 2025 Freedom Award. Everybody's getting along and has a chance to laugh about it now. It's funny what time does.
Oh, my gosh. Time heals. Look, everybody says this in Washington. Oh, well, it's the good old days and blah, blah, blah. No, there's no such thing. Like this, we have a regulated means of us having a legal fist fight in the United States, right? And that is our set of politics. And that was the cage match of the founders era.
Yeah.
And the fights there, they continue today. And we're in the midst of it right now, talking about government funding and all these things of, the president, after the most elegant dinner you can have on the planet.
Yes.
With the Brits, he's tweeting about Jimmy Kimmel. So there's always politics at play, which makes this so dynamic.
Yeah.
And especially with the commentary we heard from Annmarie, the best part of the commentary for people like us is at Bloomberg, because you cut through all this other stuff and get to what actually matters, what moves markets, what affects the economy.
Starting with an investment in Intel. Huh?
Well, what do you make of that? I mean, there seems to be a thread here in that corporations are really trying to appease the president to an extent we haven't maybe seen in previous years. Are they doing the right thing?
Oh, well, look, this is politics at play. And look, Nvidia has a massive interest in the question of the questions only this administration can answer. Where can they export chips? That is in the say of Treasury. It is in the say of a multi-agency process called CFIUS that 25 years ago no one knew existed, and now is one of the most important national security functions. The federal government has yay or nay over where you export even basic chips, much less highly sophisticated ones like Nvidia sent. So they have a major interest in making sure they're aligned with the president and the president's wishes. That's why, one of the wealthiest men in the world and one of the most consequential people for the distribution of technology is there at a state dinner to make sure that he is tight with this administration.
Wow.
It shows really the import of President 47 compared to the dynamics of President 45, where the business community was really questioning whether or not they should have connectivity. That is no longer the question. You want to have deep connectivity with this administration because it is of major consequence in a generational way.
Well, you were chairman of the Financial Services Committee. Would you be having hearings on this? The people are calling this state capitalism or worse. You're a conservative Republican. Does this align with your values?
Look, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders wanted this for the CHIPS Act, and there was resistance, bipartisan resistance to that type of direct investment in these companies. I resist this. I think it's really not where we want the government to be long term. I don't think that's in the interest of the American taxpayer. However, the Trump administration was looking at this large pot of money that was only going to be gifted to blessed industries for the Biden regime. That was part of the CHIPS Act. And so there's really no pure way to distribute this money. But a state-based capitalism is called socialism. This is not exactly, in a very traditional economic sense, the right approach for that type of connectivity here. And also not the best way to get returns for the stockholders of these companies, and not the best way to get innovation. Certainly not in here in the United States, where the free flow of capital goes to the highest and best use, and more of it goes to higher and better use over time. Politicians do an atrocious job traditionally of doing this. It was a failure in the Obama administration, was a failure in the Biden administration, and I don't think a third turn of this is going to be for the better.
Well, there is a thought out there, though, that the chip grants did help Intel especially bring out a lot of the manufacturing they had abroad stateside, and that ultimately it was helpful to get to the same goals that Donald Trump is citing as his goals, which is making chips on American soil. Why is that not still the correct strategy relative to a state, as you say, is not the way the Americans do it?
Look, if you look at technology, we do not lack for venture money going into the toughest questions in technology.
Sure.
We do not lack investment capital. What we lacked is the permitting to bring these things back on shore. And permitting is still what is impairing the ability to deliver on the CHIPS Act and, frankly, the energy tax credit stuff of the Biden administration. It's impaired by the regulatory hurdles of doing big things in America, and we've not fixed that.
But making things in America is famously very, very expensive. So the more money you have to do that, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's paying the right talent, is a benefit at the end of the day. And that's what a lot of the folks are saying the CHIPS grants afforded in a way that a lot of Trump policies aren't.
This is the rub, and this is the reason why politicians want to take our tax dollars, or actually the debt, right, the national debt, and apply it to things that are politically popular. What I would say is, if we're going to look at trade and trading arrangements, not everything should be brought onshore. We should do the highest value stuff onshore, the stuff that is most politically sensitive to national security onshore, and incentives around that. That's why you have the CHIPS dollars, right, to bring those things onshore. But let's do the harder work of litigation reform, of changing the permitting process for large and complex deals, so that we can build roads and bridges and railroads, and we can build the highest tech manufacturing on the planet here at home.
Mm-hmm. As we consider President Trump's and this administration's relationship with corporate America, that includes Howard Lutnick as well, who's been a big part of some of these arrangements, some of which you, I think, have expressed some discomfort with when we consider these investments, or the 15%, for instance, that Nvidia and AMD would provide to the government from its sales to China. Is what happened with Jimmy Kimmel any different? This idea that the president is sort of the chairman of America's board. He doesn't like this comedian who makes fun of him, and he's apparently going to be out of a job, or is this from the same file in your view?
No, that's a very different thing.
Tell us why.
Well, if you look at Secretary Bessent and Secretary Lutnick, they do two very different things, and the president likes both of the things that they do. And so you see this operationally, where Lutnick's trying to get the best deal for the American taxpayer and believes that he's running a corporate enterprise on the president's behalf to do that, and that's how he's delivering. Meeting the president's expectations, meeting the president's goals, meeting the public objectives, doing so very, very, very well. Markets-driven guy. What you see here is the cultural clashes that have been very hot. And this has been very hot since the beginning of COVID. This is very hot since President Trump entered politics. And everything is fraught with peril when you engage in this political process. And it was Republicans who were on the losing side of that lost their jobs and lost their affiliations, not just from being political commentators. Look at Ronna McDaniel, couldn't even be a political commentator because she was blackballed by her colleagues at MSNBC. So politics has been ripe at play in politics. And when these comedians go from being comedians to politicians, there are consequences to that. And you want to enter the fray.
Been fired in your
Look at late night TV is exhausting to watch. It has been so unfun because they are political commentators. That is not what the American people want. It's not Johnny Carson, who separated himself from politics
and made fun of everyone.
Made fun of everybody. But this is the difference between the two Jimmys, right? And Jimmy Kimmel was a political commentator and went into the fray.
So Fallon keeps his job? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so, because if you watch that, he's not doing politics. Yeah. He's doing the silly stuff that you love about late night TV that is broadly enjoyable no matter your politics, I think.
It's still free speech, though. Is that a fireable offense?
Well, I thought we're past this woke mob taking people out. I thought the cancel culture thing was like bad. But apparently it's now good because, look, who's getting fired is like whether or not cancel culture is good. I think cancel culture is really bad. I think we should have an open forum for debate. And don't watch if you don't think it's funny. I don't watch Jimmy Kimmel. I don't think he's funny. It's been very grating to watch. And I mean, if you look like me, you better have a sense of humor, right? And so I have a sense of humor about politics, but it gets exhausting when they think that they can just be on the left and get away with the rap of comedy. You better have a sense of humor.
I can't believe we just talked to Patrick McHenry for 15 minutes. We didn't ask you if the government's going to shut down.
I think so.
Okay. We got our job done. Patrick McHenry, Bloomberg Politics contributor on Bloomberg. Thanks for being with us here on the Thursday edition on Bloomberg TV and radio. We were just discussing with Patrick McHenry the cancellation, if I can use that term, or I guess sidelining of Jimmy Kimmel's program on ABC. A lot of people never saw or heard what Kimmel said that brought us to this moment, because we're going to talk about this with the panel coming up here, having heard from the former congressman, the former chairman on this. Let's go back to the 15th of September. This is Kimmel Live and what he told us that night.
We We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
As anything other than one of them, which upset many folks on the right. Walt Disney's ABC network now taking it off the air indefinitely is the language that we're hearing, not in fact canceled, with this backlash to the remarks that the late night host made about, of course, the shooter in the Charlie Kirk case. You know, people are very sensitive about this stuff right now, and President Trump did weigh in. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, 1:04 a.m., as we were just describing a short time ago. Of course, in the UK, local time, 1 o'clock in the morning, after a very long day of celebration, pomp and circumstance, the president wrote, "Great news for America. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Kimmel has zero talent." The president of the United States weighing in on this. He's, of course, called for the removal as well or cancellation of other programs in late night, which is something that Stephen Colbert can tell you about. We want to assemble the panel for more on this. Rick Davis is with us today, Bloomberg politics contributor, Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. And Arshi Siddiqui is here as well, CEO, Bellweather Government Affairs, former senior aide to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It's great to have both of you here. Rick, was this the right thing to do? And do you think Kimmel would have been fired without the influence of this administration?
Well, each administration has its own impact on the media, and there's no question that this administration has had its finger on the scale for a long time, right? I mean, they send their cabinet members out to right-leaning organizations to communicate their desires and programs, and they have a regular combat with other networks. So it's not like it's new that we've got this tension with Donald Trump and outside media groups. I think that in the context of what we're seeing in this administration, you touched upon it in the last segment about government intrusion into the business community. This is much more about that to me than it is about what Jimmy Kimmel said about Charlie Kirk. I mean, when you have your network affiliate organizations complaining because they have mergers and acquisitions that are in the pipeline at the FCC, and the FCC, Brendan Carr, chair, says something that, you know, is going to threaten a potential approval, and they've held up approvals for less than this in the past, then you really have a lot of federal government intrusion into the business sector. And that's just been happening every single week of this administration since the beginning. You can debate the merits of it, but that is the policy of this administration. These regulatory agencies are going to be a key part of every media organization and every business in America, until at which point in time the administration changes.
Arshi, weigh in here. At the end of the day, one of the arguments is that maybe this is for the public interest, whether you're talking about ABC and Jimmy Kimmel, whether you're talking about CBS, or whether you're even talking about government stakes in companies like Intel or Nvidia's involvement. When we're talking about the overlap between the administration and corporations, how do you view it?
Well, I think what we've seen is that there's been this exercise of complete government power in new bounds, which has been interesting for Democrats to watch, because Republicans have been the party of limited government, and we see the exact opposite. That we're talking about whether it's stakes in Intel, but now we're talking about talent decisions at a news organization and a media organization. So I think, you know, the challenge here is that this is in some ways a new low from the perspective of humor and laughter is what brings us together as a country often, especially in this town. And if you take that away, then where does that leave us? And it creates a real culture of intimidation. And I think that's what we're seeing in the corporate community, is that corporations are positioning themselves to make sure that they keep their heads down and are very, very careful on how they navigate very uncharted waters.
President wants more, by the way. We've got Colbert, Kimmel now. He also went on to write, that leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC. Does this keep rolling, Rick? Because that would kind of speak to the intimidation factor that some folks have talked about here. If networks are worried about losing their licenses, does it actually have to do with ratings?
No, I don't think it has anything to do with ratings. I don't think either one of these instances that you've described had anything to do with ratings. I think it had everything to do with the parent companies being concerned about their ability to foster corporate development, value for the shareholder in a Trump administration when some of your top talent are out there skewering him every night. And so, you know, how NBC reacts to that, if they have a merger that they need to get approved by Brendan Carr at the FCC, they're going to think twice about it. Whether or not it's making money or losing money, I don't know. But you can't separate the business interests of these parent corporations with the need for comedy within the Trump administration in order to function as a business. And these comedians are simply, you know, they're a tool in that organization. And so whether or not NBC decides to reinforce that or abandon it, we'll see, because Trump will test them, right? He is a incredibly good person at creating incredible amounts of tension amongst the people that he wants to influence. And without that tension, he doesn't have as much influence.
Rick, you're a well-respected member of the business community. You're joining us from New York, very close to some of the Wall Street big figures that we regularly have on Bloomberg television. Is there a fiduciary duty for corporations to appease the president?
No, there's not a fiduciary duty to appease the president. There's a fiduciary duty to the shareholders of their companies. And in so much as the president can affect the value of those shareholdings, is an important consideration. I mean, when Biden was in the administration, the promotion of climate programs and diversity in the board ranks was a big challenge for a lot of corporations. Now it's something different with Trump. It's not like the first time presidents have tried to influence corporate America.
Well, of course, this comes the same week as the president filed a massive lawsuit against the New York Times. And Arshi, I want to ask you about cancel culture. We've heard that term a couple of times, and it seems to be moving. Barack Obama, of all people, takes to Twitter. After years of complaining about cancel culture, he writes, the current administration has taken it to a new and dangerous level by routinely threatening regulatory action against media companies unless they muzzle or fire reporters and commentators it does not like. I'm assuming you agree with this statement, and if that's the case, what happens to the New York Times and everybody else?
Well, I wouldn't put New York Times in the cancel culture point. For me, that's
$15 billion lawsuit or something, right?
Well, cancel culture in the sense that, yes, it's an effort on the cancel culture. And we've seen that where we have the fringes of the Democratic Party and the far left and the far right who have really kind of honed in on this, and now we have the president weighing in. So to your point, in that sense, it's in some ways normalizing cancel culture in a whole new level when you get a presidential approach to this.
I believe he's also suing Rupert Murdoch, who was at the state banquet last night in London. What do you make of that?
I think the president has had a very significant track record, and a successful track record is using the legal system to promote his goals and really send strong messages. And I think that is actually a strong avenue for him to express his political leanings. So I think we are going to continue to see that, and I think that's tried and true in his DNA in terms of how he functions.
You know, Brendan Carr, at the head of the FCC, Rick, has made the point that if you want to go ahead with political commentary, you could have a podcast, go on YouTube, go stream. We're talking about broadcast licenses. Do you believe there should be a delineation between broadcasting on the public airwaves and everything else that we do online?
Well, we give network spectrum, access to the spectrum, and the result is that they make a commitment to act in the public interest. And I can tell you, having managed lots of campaigns, that there have been a lot of very heated conversations in the editorial suites of these networks over whether or not my candidate was getting the same coverage as the opponent. And it is an obligation of these networks, because of the government support they get through the airwaves, to do that. Now, if they want to find new ways to broadcast their medium, then fine, do something different. But it is actually a bargain between network broadcasters and the federal government.
Well, that's an important part of this conversation, Arshi. I mean, could this be the end of linear television as we know it? Why doesn't everybody just go online? The audiences are certainly there. You can watch this program on cable. You can watch us on YouTube right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. Does everybody need a transmitter and have to worry about what goes over the public airwaves? I do think that
the public airwaves really occupy an important space, and if we lose that is a role in a weakening of our democracy overall. Because trusted sources of news are so critical, as you well know. So I do think, from that perspective, this is bouncing up straight against freedom of speech, and that goes to the heart of what the president is trying to do here. Is absolutely, if this is going to be litigated in a fair way in the courts, fine, that is good. But I do think it is also, you can say, look at the dollar amount, it's actually also geared to really put a hole in and maybe potentially really make it very difficult for the New York Times to struggle in an already very competitive marketplace.
Well, that's all true, and this is an important conversation that we're going to continue beyond today, I'm quite sure. Big thanks to our panel, Bloomberg Politics contributor Rick Davis at World Headquarters in New York, with us here in Washington, Arshi Siddiqui, Bellweather Government Affairs. We appreciate your grace in talking about some pretty serious issues today, as always. Alongside Kriti Gupta, I'm Joe Mathieu. We're live in Washington with a half hour to go here on the Thursday edition of Balance of Power. And coming up, we'll spend some time with Ed Ludlow, who's going to give us a little bit more on this Nvidia-Intel deal. And then our conversation with Congresswoman Dina, Titus, the Democrat from Nevada, will be with us ahead on Bloomberg. Big movers on this news of a massive investment, billions of dollars worth, Nvidia pouring money into Intel. The analyst reaction has been pretty interesting as we try to understand what would be the financial benefit for Nvidia, the world's biggest chip maker, to do business with the chip company that many had left on the side of the road. Interesting. Jensen Huang, right now, of course, the CEO of Nvidia, along with Lip-Bu Tan of Intel, are holding a briefing, and we're just now starting to get some details on this deal. Huang says the Trump administration, Kriti, was not involved in the Intel partnership, which many people just assumed, as Jensen Huang was traveling with the president. They were sitting together, essentially, when this was announced.
And this is, of course, on top of the fact that the U.S. government already has a stake in Intel, so this only amplifies how much that's worth. Let's get into this with Ed Ludlow. I'm delighted to say that Ed is with us right now. Of course, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech, with us live from San Francisco, and our man when it comes to covering NVIDIA and the related companies in the chip space. What are you making of this, Ed? And was this not directed by the administration?
Nailed every single point. I've just got off the line with Jensen Huang and Lip-Bu Tan, and the way they explained it is, yes, the Trump administration had absolutely zero to do with this partnership focused on the technology. They basically explained that going back more than a year, which would predate Lip-Bu Tan's tenure as CEO of Intel, and also predate the kind of closeness of the relationship between Jensen Huang and the president, they started engineering talks. The stake is very different. And the way that Jensen Huang explained it is that, well, why wouldn't they invest in Intel? If they believe in the products that they're going to do together, then they see that this is a great addressable market opportunity. So they put the equity stake in. And from Intel's side, they still need to shore up the balance sheet with cash. You said, use the word road, and I kind of put this to Lip-Bu, if you'll allow me just for a second. If you go down to Santa Clara, about 30 miles south of where I am now, 25 miles, and you go up on the roof of Intel and you look across the 101, you will see NVIDIA. And they've been rivals across that freeway for a long time. And so this is a historic moment in that context.
Wow, I love that. This is why we talked to Ed Ludlow. I've got to ask you, though, about the relationship between not just President Trump and Jensen Huang, but Lip-Bu Tan. Going back to the 7th of August, do you remember the post? President Trump on Truth Social, the CEO of Intel, is highly conflicted and must resign immediately, saying there is no other solution to this problem. That was just the 7th of August. Ed, we've come a long way, haven't we?
We have, because then, you know, within a couple of weeks, the meeting took place at the White House between Lip-Bu Tan and the president, and then very quickly after that, the United States took this stake in Intel, which is quite rightly points out, because of the gain in Intel shares today, is now worth vastly more. To be completely transparent, those of us on the briefing didn't actually put to Lip-Bu-Tan any questions about his kind of status right now with the president. But the thing that Nvidia and Intel have in common is they are both under pressure to do more in this country. To answer your earlier question, when Jensen Huang said that the administration had no involvement in making this deal happen, he said, I am now in the United Kingdom, right, with the cabinet and the president, and that he had informed cabinet members about the deal this morning. So that's kind of the latest reporting. But Lip-Bu, in this conversation that we've just had, didn't really reflect on the president's role and their current relationship beyond the idea that Intel's committed to the United States as a place of activity.
Ed, it's great to have you, as always. Thank you for helping us sort this out. Sure. We'll be looking for more headlines on this. Check in with Ed Ludlow a bit later on with us from San Francisco at the Bloomberg Bureau there. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kriti Gupta in Washington. As we add the voice of Dina Titus, been looking forward to this conversation to get the view of a Democrat. We spoke with Patrick McHenry earlier this hour on exactly what is happening on Capitol Hill. She's from Nevada's 1st District, Congresswoman. Titus, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. It's great to see you. Are you preparing for a government shutdown? Should our audience be doing the same?
Well, we don't know. The vote has been rescheduled several times. Now it looks like it's going to come tomorrow. The Democrats are voting no, though, because there's no consideration of health care and putting back some of the cuts that have been made to Medicaid or extending the subsidies for Obamacare. And it would be an easy fix. If you can't help people who need health care, what's the point? And you leave the government open, they just take advantage of that and use it to cut more programs. So I think you'll see Democrats sticking together as a no, and who knows what their side's going to do.
Congresswoman, the CBO came out this morning and said that the extension of those subsidies would cost about $360 billion. Is that a number that everyone remembers when the debt ceiling comes back into question?
Well, I'm sure it'll be bandied around, but it may be some different number by then. You know, you've got very selective use of statistics, and what they use today may not be what they use tomorrow. You know, this is a time when the Republicans control both houses. They control the president. They control most of what the court's doing at the highest level. So if this shuts down because they won't provide those subsidies, then they're going to have to do the explaining because it's going to all be on them.
Republicans who have joined us, Congresswoman, have suggested that there is still time, that the current CR that is going to hit the floor expires on the 21st of November. Of course, the subsidies expire at the end of the year. Would that not allow time for a robust debate around Obamacare subsidies and government funding by the end of the year?
Well, it could if they would allow it, or if they have any interest in doing it. You've already heard the president say, oh, don't bother with what the Democrats want. There's been no input from our side, so you're really just kicking the can down the road. There's no indication that they'd come to the table later. They haven't come to the table up until now. They've had plenty of time. It's not like this came as a surprise that this deadline was here.
Congresswoman, we are just getting some headlines coming from the president as he speaks to a gaggle on Air Force One. If you'll bear with me, I'd like to read them to you. He's talking about taking away the TV licensing, saying it's up to the FCC's Brendan Carr. He also goes on to say the TV licenses should be taken away if it's bad publicity for me. This, of course, follows the news overnight where we did see Jimmy Kimmel being put on indefinite leave from ABC around some of his comments around Charlie Kirk and the assassination there. Congresswoman, your response to his comments?
Well, it's astounding to me that the president would say we're going to take away freedom of speech for somebody who criticizes me. I mean, it's all about me with this president. I think somebody quoted that saying that these regulatory agencies that are supposed to be watchdogs have just become lapdogs. They just do whatever he wants. The Justice Department, that's just become his personal lawyer. The FCC, you name it, whatever he wants, that's what they do. What has happened to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights? You may not like what Jimmy Kimmel says, maybe it's inappropriate, maybe you disagree with it, but you can't just take away somebody's First Amendment rights because they don't like what you're wearing or what you're saying or, you know, making you look bad, but then you don't appreciate it. I mean, good God, that's what the Constitution is there for.
Well, maybe does this help Las Vegas? Jimmy Kimmel off the air, you can go into residency on the Strip, no?
Well, Las Vegas needs some help. I'm glad you brought that up, because with all the uncertainty and the tariffs and insulting our international customers like Canada, it's hard to make them mad. They're such nice people. Tourism is down in Las Vegas, so maybe Jimmy Kimmel will perk up the Strip.
That's interesting. Of course, this is your home district. I talked to Derek Stevens about this at Circa a couple weeks ago about some of the declines that we've seen in traffic. Of course, he's doing pretty well at Circa with betting on the rise. And it brings us to an important story that you've got your hands on. A House committee rejected your attempt to restore a full federal tax deduction for gambling losses. We've talked about this, Congresswoman, on this program before. That's why Derek Stevens joined us, because the president's big, beautiful bill would only allow you to deduct 90% of losses if I come to your hometown of Las Vegas. Not that I ever lose there. You tried to get it attached to the NDAA, and it didn't work out that way. And when I talked to Derek Stevens about this at Circa, he made clear he was talking to you, Congresswoman, and your colleagues in the Nevada delegation in hopes to fix this. I want you to listen to what he said. Listen.
It's going to take people that bet frequently, some of the large bettors, some of the professional bettors, and even just some of the larger recreational bettors, and you're basically forcing them to no longer bet legally. The only ones that win out of this deal are the illegal bookmakers. Every state loses in this deal. Every state and every legalized sports book, as well as the U.S. consumer.
I don't know how worried they are about this up in the pools at Stadium Swim, Congresswoman, but do you have a plan B?
Well, I do, and I really appreciate Derek Stevens. He's been a great ally on this and kind of rounding up the gaming industry, because they weren't engaged in it too much from the beginning because they liked other parts of that big, beautiful bill. But he's really gotten them energized, and I completely agree with him. But in the first place, you don't tax somebody on money they don't have. It's like ghost money, phantom money. You know, you're paying taxes on $100,000 and you've really only got 90. You know, that doesn't make any sense. And so we've got to restore that full deduction. I'm going to use any mechanism possible. We've got the bill that stands on its own. We had the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee saying he wanted to fix it. We've got bipartisan support. The other Republican co-chair of the Gaming Caucus is on board with the bill. We can perhaps attach it to another bill come to fix what they did last time that was wrong. Maybe there's a bill at the end of the term. It's like kind of like the Christmas tree bill where you do tax extenders. So we're not giving up. Now, remember, too, you've got a whole nother year. This doesn't go into effect until the end of next year for next year's taxes. So there is time to get this done. It's a little frustrating, though. The Republicans stuck this in there. Then they suddenly realized, oh, where did this come from? This is a bad idea. And there's so many easy ways to fix it. It's like one sentence, and yet they don't seem to want to do it.
Huh. Well, it doesn't sound like you're giving up and you have some time to work with, Congresswoman.
Yes.
Well, there's a report now that Las Vegas is in talks with the NFL to host the 2029 Super Bowl. Is that the kind of deal that brings tourism back to the way you want it in Las Vegas?
Oh, absolutely. That'll be right in my district. We have that fabulous Allegiant Stadium. Las Vegas used to just be kind of a gambling entertainment town, but now we're a sports town. Aces and the Knights and the Raiders and the A's. So it'd be great to have the Super Bowl.
I'm looking forward to seeing that new baseball stadium. So you play in the slots or the tables, Congresswoman? What's your taste?
I kind of like a crap game myself.
How about that? Interesting. Is this now? Are you on the Strip or Fremont Street? Where do you go in Las Vegas?
Well, you know, it's interesting. When you live in Las Vegas, a lot of people come to visit you. And I wonder if they're visiting me or they just want to come for Las Vegas. So we take them wherever they want to go. Downtown and the Strip are both in my district.
All right, we're coming out. We're going to do the show out there, and we'll meet you at Stadium Swim. We're going to connect all the dots on this at some point. Congresswoman, thank you. We'd love to stay in touch with you on your Fair Bet Act. Congresswoman Dina Titus, the Democrat from Nevada's 1st District, which puts you right in the middle of Las Vegas. Interesting conversation, Kriti, and it's one that's being had as President Trump talks to reporters on Air Force One. He's making a lot of headlines with the gaggle on the plane.
Lots of headlines. Of course, we addressed that with the Congresswoman, his comments on Jimmy Kimmel and the role there, talking about the FCC. To me, what caught my eye, of course, is what he said around sanctions. He's saying that he's got Keir Starmer in support of the sanctions, also going on to say that the UK is not a culprit on Russian oil, but Europeans very much are.
Yeah, he made that point in the news briefing as well. We'll unpack some of what the president and the prime minister said in the late edition of Balance of Power. We'll keep tabs on what he's saying and posting from the aircraft on the way home. President Trump and the First Lady are airborne right now on their way back to the U.S., and they'll be back in Washington tonight. Bloomberg Business Week Daily, straight ahead.